Hello, good evening, and welcome back. So, as hydroxychloroquine has been halted, as in the trials from the World Health Organization have been halted because they are concerned of safety fears. Of course, this comes after Trump is saying that it's great, it's very effective, we've seen very promising results, it's worthwhile, and of course, he himself is taking it as well to try and say, well, yes, I am putting my money where my mouth is, I'm actually participating in it, and if I'm willing to risk my own life because I think it's worthwhile, then I can definitely encourage other people to do so as well. Obviously, not a doctor, but the best liquids. So, following him, they've got to say it's bad. Of course they have. They're going to cite a study to say, well, in this one, we found that it was worse than not having anything. So, well, okay, you don't want to pump your system full of drugs for something that isn't really a problem, and you definitely don't want to respond with it with an ineffective lockdown. When you look at places like Japan, and they've actually been completely fine, and then various states and cities and councils around America that haven't had lockdown, and they've also been fine, because it's almost as if sunshine is effective at killing viruses, and that if you keep people inside, their immunity systems weaken. And then if you funnel everybody into the same few large supermarkets, then they're mingling with each other much more than they would otherwise, and that is where you get the infection. So by limiting people's options, you force them into a smaller space, because that is what has happened because of the government intervention. That is yet another unintended consequence, because they don't think these things through. The idea is, we're going to close most things down, and in the few places where people are allowed to be, we're going to have social distancing. First, it doesn't happen. Secondly, people touch things and put them back, or they don't take them, but they still touch them. Then somebody else touches them, and if you're concerned about the virus spreading like that, then it has now been spread. Moreover, if you're concerned about a 6 feet rule, because you can get it from the particulates from somebody speaking or breathing, and they're breathing near products, they don't even need to touch them, but they're going to cover the entire shop as they're walking through and breathing through the aisles. So again, it doesn't have the intended outcome, as is the case with government intervention. So instead, because it's still a problem, they've got to have a cure, the UK has authorized the antiviral drug Remdesivir. So a drug treatment called Remdesivir that appears to shorten recovery time for people with coronavirus is being made available on the NHS. And you might have noticed that there's a lack of talk about vaccines again. Firstly, they're not necessary. But secondly, that the trial done in Oxford on monkeys, although it has been approved for humans, has found that all of them still contracted coronavirus after the vaccine, which proved it was entirely inadequate. So, maybe back to the drawing boards there, lads. But Health Secretary Matt Hancock said it was probably the biggest step forward in the treatment of coronavirus since the crisis began. Remdesivir is an antiviral medicine that has been used against Ebola. We're allowed to call it Ebola because that's a geographical place. So we can call it the Wu flu or the CCP virus. Fantastic. UK regulators say there was enough evidence to approve its use in selected COVID-19 hospital patients. For the time being, and due to limited supplies, it will go to those most likely to benefit. That is to say, it's going to go to frontline workers and those who are most badly affected. So, Minister for Innovation Lord Bethell said, "This shows fantastic progress. As we navigate this unprecedented period, we must be on the front foot of the latest medical advancements while always ensuring patient safety remains a top priority. The latest expert scientific advice at the heart of every decision we make, and we will continue to monitor Remdesivir's success in clinical trials across the country to ensure the best results for UK patients." So, it is of course all being hyped up. We have heard talks of it before in the previous days and even weeks coming out of Trump's press briefings as well. Of course, we wouldn't want to give him any undue credit. So, Dr. Stephen Griffin said patients with the most severe disease would be likely to receive it first. To quote, "While this is clearly the most ethically sound approach, it also means that we ought not to expect the drug to immediately act as a magic bullet. We can instead hope for improved recovery rates and a reduction in patient mortality, which we hope will benefit as many patients as possible. Other drugs being investigated for coronavirus include those for malaria, hydroxychloroquine, and HIV." So the results that they've been getting seems to shorten the lifespan of the virus by about 4 days. Of course, at that point, because you're looking at something which is normally about 14 days, that you're trying to just weaken it just enough to get the human's immune system to fight it off. That is the way that most of these work. That they don't kill off the virus entirely themselves, but instead they weaken it enough so that the immune system can still take care of it. The best cure for any of the diseases is still the human immune system. So the intent is to strengthen that as much as possible and then weaken the disease of the virus, which is very, very important because of the T cells, because of the antibodies, that you need to be able to have protection against it should it ever flare up again. Because chances are you're not going to get rid of it completely. Instead, there's going to be some still lingering in your blood system, which means that you need to be able to fight it off, because if not, then of course, that is when you get taken out. Just like we've seen in many patients with any sort of immune suppressants. It could be taking the drugs of immunosuppressants after organ transplants, or it could be of things like HIV and then developing into AIDS, where they have a suppressed immune system, and therefore the small things, something which maybe has gone into remission, then flares back up and affects them a lot more than it did before, because of course the immune system has been compromised, and that is what we are relying on in the vast majority of cases in order to kill off something. You're hoping that the immune system isn't so compromised as to then wipe out it's entirely, so that the virus can still take over. You want the immune system weak enough to then not attack the organ transplant, for example, but is only in terms of accepting that organ instead of then attacking anything else. And it's not a precise science. Unfortunately, there is still some overlap. That's why it's a depressed immune system. But nonetheless, things are looking good. It does seem like we have another possible cure. Not really necessary, but I have so much more optimism going into things where they say they have a possible cure instead of suggesting that they have a vaccine, because then you've got a much better chance of being able to have it as a choice, as an opt-in, instead of having it mandated and saying that you can't travel, you can't do anything, you can't have a job unless you've had this vaccination. So it's a far more promising situation, and we all look forward to how it pans out. So keep an eye on this as well. And until next time, as always, have a good one.